Part 1, The Broken Ship and the Impossible Bet. The neon lights of Port Nexus's underbelly district cast an eerie purple glow across Captain Jackson Reed's weathered face as he stared at his ship's diagnostic readout. The ancient vessel, lovingly named Stellar Horizon, had finally given up the ghost after 20 years of faithful service. The main quantum drive was completely shot, and the backup systems weren't far behind. "Well," he muttered, running a hand through his dark, tousled hair, "this is just perfect." The repair costs would be astronomical, far more than he had in his accounts. The last job had barely covered fuel costs, and now he was stuck on one of the most notorious space stations in the Outer Rim, where being human made him stick out like a supernova in deep space. Port Nexus was a massive structure, a sprawling metropolis of steel and starlight that hung in the void between three different alien empires. It was a place where laws were more like suggestions, and the only real currency was influence. The station's unofficial motto might as well have been, "No questions asked, but all debts collected." Jackson knew of only one person who might be able to help him out of this mess, though the thought made his stomach churn: Vexor Drow, the most powerful crime lord this side of the Spiral Arm. The old alien ran everything from smuggling operations to gladiatorial combat rings, and his reputation for both generosity and cruelty was legendary. Jackson's boots echoed against the metal deck plates as he made his way through the winding corridors of the station's lower levels. The further down he went, the more the pristine walls gave way to jury-rigged repairs and makeshift modifications. The air grew thicker with the smell of exotic spices and mechanical oil, the perfume of the underworld. Finally, he reached his destination, the Obsidian Vale, Vexor's personal establishment. The entrance was guarded by two hulking Zorathian warriors, their scaled skin reflecting the red light from the club sign. They eyed Jackson with their four yellow eyes, mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement or hunger. It was hard to tell with their species. "I'm here to see Vexor," Jackson stated, keeping his voice steady and his posture confident. Showing weakness here was like bleeding in shark-infested waters. The guards exchanged looks before one of them activated their comm device. After a brief conversation in their native tongue, they stepped aside, allowing Jackson to enter. The interior of the Obsidian Vale was a study in calculated excess. Holographic dancers performed impossible feats in midair, while patrons from a dozen different species conducted their business in shadowy booths. The music was a pulsing blend of alien rhythms that seemed to bypass the ears and vibrate directly in the bones. At the far end of the main room, elevated above the crowd, sat Vexor Drow himself. The crime lord's massive frame dominated his private booth, his dark emerald skin a sharp contrast to his long silver beard. His piercing blue eyes seemed to glow with internal fire as they fixed upon Jackson. Beside him sat his daughter, Lyra, a vision of exotic beauty that made Jackson's breath catch in his throat. Her long silver hair was adorned with crystalline chains that caught the light with every movement, and her dress seemed to be made of liquid starlight. She regarded the human with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "Ah, the human returns to my humble establishment," Vexor's voice boomed, carrying easily over the music. "Come closer, boy. Let me look at you properly." Jackson approached the booth, aware of every eye in the place turning to watch him. He stopped at a respectful distance and gave a slight bow, not too deep, just enough to show respect without appearing servile. "Lord Drow," he said, "I find myself in need of your assistance." The old alien's laugh was like thunder. "Of course you do. Why else would a proud human male venture into my domain? Tell me, what brings you to seek my aid?" Jackson explained his situation succinctly, laying out the details of his ship's breakdown and his need for funds to repair it. As he spoke, he noticed Lyra's expression shift from boredom to something approaching interest. "A simple matter," Vexor mused, stroking his beard. "But why should I help you? What can you offer in return?" "I'm willing to work off the debt," Jackson replied without hesitation. "Any job you need done, I can handle it." This prompted another laugh from Vexor, louder than before, and several of his associates joined in. Even Lyra covered her mouth to hide a smile. "Any job?" Vexor's eyes glittered dangerously. Such confidence from a human. "Very well. I have a task that needs doing, something that has proved challenging for others. There's a certain item I need retrieved from the Black Spire mining colony." Vexor continued, leaning forward. "A data crystal containing some rather sensitive information. The security there is formidable. 3 of my best teams have already failed." Jackson maintained his confident stance. "Security systems are my specialty. I can get your crystal." Vexor's grin widened, showing pointed teeth. "Such certainty. Tell me, human, what makes you think you can succeed where others have failed so spectacularly?" "Because I'm not just a pilot or a smuggler," Jackson replied, a slight smirk playing at his lips. "I'm also an expert in quantum computing and neural interface systems. Your teams probably tried to brute force their way in. I'll slide right through their defenses like they aren't even there." The crime lord's eyes narrowed, but his grin remained. "Well then, let's make this interesting." He gestured to his daughter, who raised an elegant eyebrow. "If you succeed in this impossible task, I'll not only clear your debt, I'll give you my most precious treasure, my daughter's hand in marriage." The room erupted in laughter. Lyra's amused expression froze, then shifted to outrage. "Father, you can't be serious." "Why not, my dear?" Vexor chuckled. "After all, there's no chance this human will actually succeed. And if by some miracle he does..." He shrugged his massive shoulders. "Well, then he would have proved himself worthy, wouldn't he?" Jackson looked between father and daughter, his mind racing. This was more than he'd bargained for, but backing down now would mean losing everything. Besides, something in Lyra's blue eyes caught his attention, a flash of intelligence and strength that intrigued him far more than her obvious beauty. "I accept," he said firmly. "I'll have your crystal within 3 standard days." 3 days? Vexor roared with laughter again. "Now I know you're either insane or stupid. But very well. You have your chance, human. Don't waste it." As Jackson turned to leave, he caught Lyra's gaze one last time. Behind her initial disdain, he saw something else, a glimmer of curiosity, perhaps even hope. Whatever her relationship with her father, it seemed she wasn't entirely satisfied with being used as a bargaining chip. This job just got a lot more interesting. Part 2, The Quantum Heist. Jackson's fingers flew across the holographic interface of his ship's quantum computer, streams of data cascading through the darkened cabin like luminescent waterfalls. The Black Spire mining colony's communication buoy floated less than a kilometer from his position, its automated defenses completely unaware of his presence thanks to his ship's advanced stealth systems, a gift from a grateful client who'd underestimated human ingenuity. "Let's see what makes you tick," he muttered, initiating a passive scan of the buoy's quantum transmission protocols. The colony's mining operations required constant communication with their corporate headquarters, which meant regular data packet transfers through these relay stations. Each packet was a potential doorway, if you knew how to knock properly. His ship, the Stellar Horizon, might be old and in need of repairs, but its quantum computing core was state-of-the-art. Jackson had modified it himself, integrating human processing architecture with alien quantum technology in ways that made traditional security systems look like child's locks. The challenge wasn't just intercepting the transmissions, any decent hacker could do that. The real trick was understanding the quantum encryption patterns well enough to predict their fluctuations. The cabin was dark except for the soft blue glow of the holographic displays, creating an almost meditative atmosphere as he worked. Jackson recalled the scene in the Obsidian Vale, Vexor's thunderous laughter, the amused glances from his associates, and most notably, the sparkle in Lyra's blue eyes as she'd regarded him with that mixture of curiosity and disdain. The memory only fueled his determination. Hours ticked by as Jackson delved deeper into the colony's quantum security architecture. Most hackers approached such systems like battering rams, trying to force their way through. But quantum computing wasn't about brute force, it was about understanding the dance of particles at their most fundamental level. Fascinating, he murmured, watching the encryption patterns shift and flow. The colony used a modified Heisenberg-type security protocol, supposedly unbreakable due to the uncertainty principle itself. But they'd made one crucial mistake: they assumed quantum states could only be observed or altered, not both simultaneously. The first breakthrough came 6 hours into the operation. Jackson isolated a recurring pattern in the quantum noise, a subtle flaw in their encryption that most would overlook. Like a fingerprint in the static, it revealed the underlying structure of their security system. The colony's defenses were designed to detect and repel direct attacks, but they hadn't considered someone who could manipulate the quantum states themselves. Gotcha, he grinned, establishing a quantum entanglement link with the buoy's primary processor. Rather than trying to break through their security, he was creating a parallel system that mirrored their own. Every security check would read his intrusion as part of their normal operations. Jackson stretched in his pilot's chair, his muscles stiff from hours of intense concentration. He allowed himself a brief break, just long enough to grab a stimulant pack from his supplies. The bitter taste of synthetic caffeine filled his mouth as he considered his next move. The colony's network was vast, with multiple layers of security protecting different types of data. He needed to find one specific crystal in this digital haystack. Time to get creative, he said to himself, initiating a new series of quantum manipulations. His fingers danced across the holographic interface, weaving complex patterns in the data stream. Each movement was precise, calculated, yet fluid, like conducting an orchestra of quantum possibilities. The next phase required patience. Jackson watched as the data packets flowed through the buoy, each one carrying fragments of information about the colony's operations, mining outputs, personnel records, maintenance schedules, all valuable to the right buyer, but not what he was after. He needed something special, something Vexer wanted badly enough to risk his daughter's hand in marriage. His monitoring algorithms flagged something unusual, a heavily encrypted data packet scheduled for transfer in the next 6 hours. The encryption level was far beyond anything else in the system, using quantum protocols he'd only seen in military-grade security systems. This has to be it, Jackson leaned forward, his excitement building. The crystal would be physically transported to the communication hub for transmission, providing him the perfect opportunity to intercept it. But first, he needed to understand exactly what he was dealing with. The quantum analysis revealed layers upon layers of security. Whoever had designed this system was a master of their craft. Traditional decryption methods would take years to break through. Fortunately, Jackson had no intention of playing by their rules. He spent the next few hours preparing his infiltration program, writing quantum algorithms that would synchronize perfectly with the colony's transmission protocols. One wrong quantum state, and the entire system would lock down. But Jackson had an advantage none of Vexer's previous teams possessed: he understood how to make the security system work for him rather than against him. "Let's show them what human ingenuity can do," he muttered, fingers flying across the interface as he fine-tuned his program. The holographic displays filled with cascading lines of quantum code, each sequence precisely calibrated to slip through the colony's defenses like a ghost through walls. When the time came for the scheduled transmission, Jackson was ready. He watched as the data crystal was connected to the colony's quantum network, its contents preparing for transmission. The security protocols activated exactly as he'd predicted, creating a supposedly impenetrable quantum tunnel between the colony and its destination. Jackson executed his program with surgical precision. To the colony's security systems, it appeared as if the data crystal had been successfully transmitted and received. In reality, Jackson had created a quantum mirror state, redirecting the true data stream to his ship while sending empty packets in its place. And that, he said with satisfaction, is how humans do it. The entire operation had taken less than 24 hours, far shorter than the 3 days he'd been given. As the stolen data began decrypting on his secondary displays, Jackson allowed himself a moment to appreciate the elegance of his solution. He hadn't just retrieved the crystal, he'd done it without leaving a single trace of his presence. As Jackson began analyzing the decrypted data, his eyes widened. This was far more than just corporate secrets or trade routes. The crystal contained detailed records of high-level corruption within the Interstellar Commerce Guild, including transaction logs, blackmail material, and evidence of massive fraud schemes. No wonder Vexer wanted it so badly, Jackson murmured, understanding now why the crime lord had been willing to stake his daughter's hand on this job. Vexer wasn't just testing him, he was looking for someone capable of handling sensitive information at this level. The marriage offer wasn't just a joke, it was a potential alliance. He spent the next few hours creating backup copies of the data and implementing his own quantum encryption. If things went south with Vexer, having leverage wouldn't hurt. But Jackson found his thoughts drifting more toward Lyra than toward political machinations. He remembered the way she'd carried herself in the Obsidian Veil, that perfect blend of grace and power. There had been intelligence in those blue eyes, and something else, a hint of rebellion against her father's casual use of her as a bargaining chip. The navigation computer chimed, indicating they were approaching Port Nexus. Through the view screen, Jackson could see the massive space station glittering against the backdrop of stars, its massive docking ring slowly rotating like the gears of some cosmic clock. Somewhere in that maze of steel and light, Vexer Drowl was probably laughing about his clever trick, thinking he'd sent another fool on an impossible mission. Time to wipe that smile off your face, Jackson said, initiating docking procedures. He tucked the data crystal securely into his jacket pocket, feeling its weight against his chest like a promise of things to come. He hadn't just succeeded in his mission, he'd exceeded all. Part 3, The Return to Port Nexus. Jackson performed one final check of his ship's systems before heading to the airlock. He'd made sure to document every step of his quantum infiltration, creating a detailed analysis of the colony's security weaknesses. That kind of information would be valuable to Vexer, and would prove that Jackson was more than just lucky. He'd approached the challenge with precision, skill, and innovation that would be impossible to dismiss. The data crystal felt warm in his pocket as he stepped onto Port Nexus's docking level. The station's artificial gravity embraced him, slightly lighter than Earth standard but comfortable enough. The corridors were busy with beings of various species, most of them giving him curious glances. Humans were still rare enough in this part of space to draw attention, but soon they'd have something else to talk about besides his species. He could already imagine the scene that would unfold in the Obsidian Veil. Vexer's smug certainty would shatter when Jackson revealed not only the crystal but also his complete understanding of its contents. And Lyra, would she still look at him with that same amused disdain, or would there be something else in those blue eyes when she realized what he'd accomplished? Time to make history, Jackson muttered, straightening his jacket as he headed toward the station's entertainment district. He'd just proven that humans could match and exceed alien technology at its own game. Now he was about to show them that human determination could overcome any challenge, even winning the heart of a crime lord's daughter. The Obsidian Veil pulsed with an electric atmosphere as Jackson strode through its ornate entrance. Music throbbed through the air, a blend of alien rhythms that seemed to match his confident heartbeat. The data crystal in his jacket pocket felt warm against his chest, like a talisman of victory. Word of his challenge had spread through Port Nexus like wildfire, drawing a crowd that made the club's vast interior seem intimate. Alien faces of every description turned to watch him pass, some curious, others skeptical, all intense. The whispers that followed in his wake carried tones of disbelief and anticipation in a dozen different languages. The lighting had been adjusted since his last visit, creating dramatic shadows that made the club feel more like a theater stage. Appropriate, Jackson thought, given the performance he was about to deliver. Holographic dancers twirled overhead, their ethereal forms casting shifting patterns of light across the assembled spectators. Vexor dominated his elevated booth like a monarch on his throne, his massive frame draped in what appeared to be ceremonial robes of deep emerald and silver. But it was Lyra who caught and held Jackson's attention. She stood at her father's right hand, no longer seated demurely beside him. Her gown seemed to capture starlight itself, the fabric shifting between shades of blue that complemented her skin perfectly. Crystalline chains woven through her silver hair chimed softly with each movement, creating a melody that seemed designed to draw him closer. Well, Vexor's voice rolled through the club like thunder, cutting through the ambient noise and bringing conversations to an abrupt halt. The human returns, earlier than expected, I might add. Come to admit defeat? The crowd's collective attention focused on Jackson, the tension in the room rising to almost painful levels. He could feel Lyra's gaze on him, intense and calculating, though he kept his eyes locked on Vexor. Her presence at the edge of his vision was like a magnetic field, drawing his awareness even as he maintained his composure. Actually, Jackson said, his voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent club, I came to discuss the terms of our agreement. He reached into his jacket with deliberate slowness, enjoying the way Vexor's amused expression flickered with uncertainty. The data crystal caught the club's ambient light as he held it up, its faceted surface splitting the colors into rainbow fragments. A collective gasp rippled through the gathered crowd. One of Vexor's advisors, a tall, gray-skinned being with multiple eyes, actually took a step backward. Impossible, the advisor muttered, all four eyes fixed on the crystal. The colony's quantum security was impressive, Jackson cut in, tossing the crystal onto the table before Vexor. It landed with a soft click that somehow seemed to echo through the vast space. But not impressive enough. You'll find everything you wanted, plus a complete analysis of their security weaknesses. His lips curved into a confident smile. Consider it a wedding gift. The crowd erupted in a chaos of whispers and exclamations. Jackson caught fragments of conversations in various languages, most expressing disbelief or amazement. But he kept his attention focused on the two figures that mattered most, Vexor, whose massive fingers now closed around the crystal with surprising delicacy, and Lyra, whose blue eyes had widened with genuine interest. Vexor inserted the crystal into a reader embedded in his table, and holographic displays bloomed to life around him. Data streams cascaded through the air, their blue-white glow reflecting off his emerald skin and silver beard. His piercing blue eyes narrowed as he scanned through the information, his expression darkening with each passing moment. Fascinating, he rumbled, stroking his beard thoughtfully. You didn't just retrieve the data, you dismantled their entire security network. His gaze lifted to Jackson, carrying a new weight of consideration. Perhaps I underestimated human potential. Lyra moved forward then, her movements fluid and graceful. May I, Father? She asked, gesturing toward the displays. Her voice carried a musical quality that sent pleasant shivers down Jackson's spine. At Vexor's nod, she began reviewing the technical data. Jackson watched as her expression shifted from professional interest to genuine amazement. Her fingers danced through the holographic displays with practiced ease, manipulating the data streams with an expertise that matched his own. This quantum manipulation technique, she said, turning to face him fully for the first time. I've never seen anything like it. The admiration in her voice was unmistakable, and something else flickered in those blue eyes, a heat that had nothing to do with technology. Human ingenuity, Jackson replied, holding her gaze. We have a knack for finding unexpected solutions. The double meaning in his words wasn't lost on either of them. The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken possibilities. Lyra's lips curved into a subtle smile that promised far more than mere technical discussions. The crystalline chains in her hair chimed softly as she moved closer to examine another display, her exotic perfume washing over him, a scent that reminded him of Earth's summer nights but with an alien undertone that made his pulse quicken. Vexor watched their exchange with calculating eyes, his massive frame shifting in his throne-like chair. The crowd around them seemed to hold its collective breath, sensing the shifting dynamics of power in play. Indeed, Vexor said finally, rising to his full height. His ceremonial robes rustled as he towered over everyone present, casting long shadows in the club's dramatic lighting. A deal is a deal, and my word is my bond. He gestured between Jackson and Lyra, the movement somehow both graceful and threatening. The marriage will take place. Actually, Jackson interrupted, causing another wave of murmurs through the crowd. He stepped forward, his fingers dancing through the holographic display to reveal another layer of data. Before we discuss wedding arrangements, there's something else in that crystal you might want to see. The hologram shifted, revealing strings of numbers and names, something about certain guild officials and their interesting financial arrangements. Vexor's blue eyes widened as he processed the implications. His daughter's hand wasn't just a prize anymore, it was an alliance he suddenly needed very badly. The crime lord's expression shifted through a range of emotions: surprise, calculation, and finally something approaching respect. Perhaps, Lyra suggested, her voice carrying a hint of amusement and something darker, more promising, we should discuss this somewhere more private. Her eyes met Jackson's again, this time with unmistakable heat. The way she moved toward him was pure grace, but there was nothing demure about it. This was a predator recognizing an equal. Jackson felt the weight of dozens of alien gazes on them, but all he could focus on was the way Lyra's gown shifted with each step, how the light played across her emerald skin, the subtle curve of her smile that suggested she knew exactly what effect she was having on him. Vexor's deep chuckle broke the tension. My private office would be more appropriate for such delicate negotiations. He gestured toward a concealed door behind his booth. After you, future son-in-law. The title sent another ripple through the crowd. Jackson caught fragments of conversations as he followed Vexor and Lyra, speculation about human capabilities, whispered debates about the implications of such an alliance, and more than a few comments about the obvious chemistry between him and the crime lord's daughter. As they walked, Lyra fell into step beside him, close enough that her arm occasionally brushed against his. Each contact sent sparks of electricity through his body. Her perfume enveloped him, an intoxicating blend of exotic spices and something uniquely her. Part 4, The Private Negotiations. Vexor's private office was a study in calculated opulence. Viewport windows offered a panoramic view of Port Nexus against the starfield void, while ancient artifacts from a dozen worlds decorated the walls. The crime lord settled behind his massive desk, a piece of furniture that seemed carved from a single block of some iridescent crystal. Jackson and Lyra took seats across from him, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her emerald skin. The crystalline chains in her hair caught starlight from the viewport, creating a hypnotic pattern of light and shadow across her features. Now then, Vexor rumbled, activating a privacy field that surrounded them in a subtle shimmer of energy. Let's discuss the true value of what you've acquired, human. The negotiations that followed were like an elaborate dance, with each participant testing the other's limits and responses. Jackson revealed the extent of the guild corruption evidence piece by piece, watching as Vexor's expression shifted between calculation and appreciation. But it was Lyra who commanded most of his attention. She participated in the discussion with razor-sharp intelligence, offering insights that showed she was far more than just a beautiful bargaining chip. Each time she leaned forward to examine a holographic display, her perfume teased his senses, making it increasingly difficult to maintain his professional demeanor. Your quantum manipulation technique, Lyra said, rising from her chair to circle behind Jackson. Her fingers brushed his shoulder as she passed, sending electricity through his body. It could revolutionize our entire operation. Jackson turned to follow her movement, admiring how her gown caught the starlight. The technique requires an intimate knowledge of quantum states, he replied, letting his voice drop to a suggestive tone. It's all about understanding how particles interact, how they danced together. Vexer watched their exchange with knowing eyes, his massive frame relaxed in his chair. The crime lord's initial shock at Jackson's success had transformed into something more calculating. Perhaps, he suggested, my daughter could benefit from a more detailed demonstration of your methods. The implications hung in the air like perfumed smoke. Lyra's blue eyes met Jackson's, filled with both challenge and promise. She moved closer, her presence magnetic. After all, she purred, if we're to be married, we should understand each other's capabilities thoroughly. Her fingers traced patterns on the arm of his chair, each movement deliberate and loaded with meaning. Jackson maintained his composure, though his pulse quickened. This was more than just attraction, it was a test of control, of dominance, of who would lead this dance of power and desire. Understanding, he said, rising to stand eye to eye with her, requires hands-on experience. The air between them crackled with tension. Lyra's lips curved into a predatory smile that matched his own. She was tall for her species, bringing them almost to equal height, perfect for the intimate standoff they now found themselves in. Father, she said, never breaking eye contact with Jackson, perhaps you could give us access to the private quantum lab for technical demonstrations. Vexer's deep chuckle filled the office. Of course. Technical matters should be handled with appropriate privacy. He activated a control panel on his desk. The lab is yours for the evening. I trust you'll both find the equipment satisfactory. As they left the office, Jackson felt the weight of dozens of alien gazes following their progress through the obsidian veil. The crowd parted before them, whispers and knowing looks trailing in their wake. Lyra moved with fluid grace beside him, each step a deliberate display of power and allure. The quantum lab proved to be a sophisticated facility hidden behind unmarked doors. As they entered, the lights automatically dimmed to a sultry glow, and holographic displays sprang to life around them. Now then, Lyra said, activating the privacy locks with a casual gesture. Show me exactly how you manipulate those quantum states. Her voice carried heat and challenge in equal measure. Jackson stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her emerald skin. The secret, he murmured, is understanding that everything is connected. Every particle, every wave. His fingers traced the air near her arm, not quite touching. It's all about anticipating the reactions. Lyra's breath caught as Jackson's fingers finally made contact with her skin, tracing patterns that mirrored the quantum formulas displayed around them. The holographic equations cast shifting patterns of light across her emerald skin, creating an ethereal display. Humans, she breathed, her voice husky, are full of surprises. Her own hands moved to explore the contours of his shoulders, testing the unfamiliar human musculature. Your species is so young in galactic terms, yet you understand things that have eluded others for millennia. Jackson guided her backward until she was pressed against a control panel, their bodies aligned like perfectly matched quantum states. We're good at adapting, he murmured against her ear. At finding new ways to interface with alien systems. The double entendre drew a throaty laugh from her. Show me, she challenged, her blue eyes blazing with desire and competitive spirit. Prove that my father's judgment wasn't just luck. Around them, the quantum displays pulsed in rhythm with their accelerating heartbeats. The lab's privacy field ensured their solitude, but there was still a thrill of danger, of breaking unwritten rules and crossing boundaries between species. Their first kiss was like a quantum entanglement, two separate beings suddenly operating as one synchronized system. Lyra's exotic taste, somewhere between earth spices and alien sweetness, made Jackson's head spin. The crystalline chains in her hair chimed softly as she pulled back to study his face. Her blue eyes held a mixture of wonder and hunger. I've heard stories about human stamina, she whispered, her fingers tracing the contours of his chest. About your species' unique adaptability. Would you like a practical demonstration? Jackson's voice was rough with desire. His hands found the small of her back, pulling her closer. The fabric of her gown seemed to respond to his touch, shifting colors like quantum states. The lab's holographic displays reflected their movements, creating ethereal patterns that danced around them. Each touch, each kiss generated new cascades of light and color, as if the quantum computer was responding to their growing passion. My father thought he was making a joke, Lyra said between heated kisses, offering me as a prize. But I think... She gasped as Jackson found a particularly sensitive spot on her neck. I think the joke might be on him. Their coupling was like a fusion of different worlds, human passion meeting alien grace, creating something entirely new and unexpected. The quantum formulas surrounding them seemed to pulse in harmony with their movements, a testament to the breaking of barriers between species. Later, as they lay entwined on the lab's cushioned observation couch, Lyra traced patterns on Jackson's chest. "You've exceeded expectations in every possible way," she murmured, satisfaction evident in her voice. "Your father's face when I succeeded," Jackson mused, running his fingers through her silver hair, careful not to disturb the crystalline chains. "I don't think he expected this outcome when he made that joke."